We're going to get started. Hey, folks, we're going to get started since it's 10:30. We want to take advantage of every moment that we have together. So welcome to ThinqStudio, We Speak for the Trees. My name is Ramy Kalir. I'm an assistant professor of learning technologies at CU Denver. I'm joined by my dear colleagues, Lorax drawer and man of all magic, Brad Hinson, and also our wonderful Michael Zinzer, who's a, I believe, professor, is that right, of psychology? Associate professor of psychology, also at CU Denver. So
thanks for the promotion, though.
Oh, hey, if I could give it away, I'll give it away. You certainly earned it. So we're going to dive right in today with some interactive conversation and activities related to a topic that Michael, Brad, and I care a lot about, which is not only digital pedagogy, but critical digital pedagogy. And I was thrilled this morning when I walked in to find out that we all received notebooks, because we all need a piece of paper. And we all need a piece of paper that is detached from the pad or paper that it's on. So right now, everybody, let's just rip it off, lots of noise, make sure that you've got a piece of paper that you can very easily pass around.
If anybody needs one, I got some
And
more.
we have extra paper, or you can use my notebook, it's fine, but we all will need, as we start to begin to engage in this conversation, a piece of paper. And as we rip, and as we get our tools organized, I also want to point folks to two important resources relating to our work. One is our website, ThinqStudio. If you just go to think.studio, you plug it into any web browser. You don't need a www, just think.studio. That will get you to our website. And also our Twitter handle is @ThinqStudio, and that's think with a Q, just because. Okay, so we're going to begin. Before we get to why you ripped off that paper, we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to open this up for a conversation that's inspired by this quote from our chancellor at CU Denver, Chancellor Carell. And she's been an advocate and a supporter of our work for the past few years now. And in helping us to launch this work at CU Denver, she noted the following: digital technologies are changing the way we think, learn, and teach, and providing faculty professional development opportunities on quality digital pedagogy. ThinqStudio will advance our university's culture of transformative teaching and learning in today's online, hybrid, and face-to-face classrooms. ThinqStudio is our commitment to critical and consequential digital pedagogy. So when the chancellor mentions the importance and the kind of consequentiality of critical digital pedagogy, what might she mean? But also, how do we, as faculty, as designers, as researchers, how do we understand that, and how do we then begin to enact that? And that's what we want to begin by talking about today. So the floor is open. What's critical pedagogy? What might this mean to folks? What comes to mind?
A continuous process of thinking about of defining pedagogy.
Okay. Continuous process. Okay. Brad, by the way, is taking notes in our think board over here.
If you say something brilliant, I'll draw it.
Okay, thank you for that first contribution. What else? What else is critical pedagogy?
Instilling excitement.
Instilling excitement, okay.
Thinking about equity issues.
About equity. Thank you.
Something that's intersectional.
What do you mean by intersectional?
That our identities are not hierarchical, but intersectional, that my whiteness and my maleness, my cisgenderedness, my heterosexuality are all part of my identity, and that we need to have pedagogy that is reflective and interrogates those identities.
Thank you. Appreciate that. What else?
So design around what students specifically need, not just what we like.
Any other thoughts that come to mind when we think about critical pedagogy? I'll provide a few as a complement to what everyone else has said, because this has resonated with some of our work in ThinqStudio. We think about critical pedagogy as being essential. It's something that's necessary. It's critical in the sense that if it wasn't there, what else might there be? Critical in terms of defining what matters, and also critical in terms of interpretation, almost like critique. Critical reflection, and also thinking. Critical thinking being important across a variety of disciplines. A number of equity and intersectional issues were mentioned, and of course we think a lot about criticizing institutional injustice and inequity in this work. It's very important to us. And also, as folks who, at least myself and Brad in particular, are coming out of a background in a school of education, where critical pedagogy, and a tradition of critical pedagogy that can be traced back to folks like Maxine Greene and Bell Hooks and Paulo Freire, really kind of brings a spirit of criticality to our work. So this is some of what we think about when we think about critical pedagogy. Now that's part of what we do in ThinqStudio. Another piece of what we do and what we care a lot about is digital pedagogy. And so a similar question to all of us. When we think about digital pedagogy, what comes to mind? What's digital pedagogy? Is that a hand?
The use of online materials and support to aid the learning process.
Online materials, support. Okay.
Creating engaging learning, not just ticking the boxes on, I did the discussion board, I did this, I did the post, but how can we get students to actually engage with and be interested with and share that material?
Okay. Engagement matters. Active engagement. Thank you. What else comes to mind with digital pedagogy? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, keep it. Shout it out.
Alternative and inclusive spaces of learning.
Can you say a little bit more about how digital spaces can be inclusive spaces?
So I have students who have told me that they do better in online courses because they are able to articulate their ideas better, because in on-campus courses there are students who will just take over the conversation, or students don't feel comfortable speaking in large groups. And then there's this aspect of metacognition that's taking place, because especially if it's what you call, it's not happening together at the same time, asynchronous. And some students find that to be an inclusive space of learning compared to face-to-face.
Thank you, Gita. Appreciate that. What else? Digital pedagogy.
Scalability.
Scalability. Can you, I feel like I hear that term a lot, and I'm sometimes not sure what it means. What does that mean to you?
That means when I put my course online, I went from people who could be there Wednesday at 7 o'clock to people all over the world who could be there whenever they wanted to.
Up to the level of a MOOC. In which case, that's a bad word. Sorry.
So let me point out a few things that, again, for us, as part of our ThinqStudio work, we've been thinking about in terms of digital pedagogy. We typically think of tools as means. They're not ends in themselves. Tools are flashy and sexy, and those typically, perhaps like the MOOC, unfortunately or fortunately, kind of tend to wane out over the years. We see tools as means, as ways to get at some of these kind of core critical pedagogical commitments that we hold. We care a lot about, and I think are increasingly caring a lot about, both OER, open educational resources, but also open educational practices. Thinking a lot about the kinds of pedagogical practices that create perhaps the kind of inclusivity that Gita was actually mentioning just a few moments ago, that allows for different kinds of thinking through open practice. For us, digital pedagogy is learner-centered. That was also mentioned. We're not designing for ourselves. We're designing in response to our students. And it's also iterative and creative. And so these are some of our commitments as digital pedagogues. Not surprisingly, we're working at the intersection of these two areas as we begin to think about critical digital pedagogy. And of course, our work is evolving. It's very formative. It's very messy. And what we've been able to do on our campus over the past year is to support faculty in thinking about the intersection of critical pedagogy and digital pedagogy and play in this space. And so we're going to play in that space for the next few moments in this room. I know that, ironically, speaking about critical and creative approaches, we're sitting in rows, you're all facing me, I'm lecturing at you. It's a really good modeling of best practice. That being said, I'm going to attempt to switch it up a little bit, and this is why I had you all tear a piece of paper out of your notebook. So this is a quote from a dear friend and colleague of ours, Jesse Stommel. He was actually just on campus last week. He gave the closing keynote at a day-long professional learning event that we ran called Rethink. And we'll talk about Rethink kind of in the second half of this presentation. Jesse has written extensively and passionately about what we might understand as critical digital pedagogy. And one of his observations is the following: that critical digital pedagogy demands that open and networked educational environments must not be merely repositories of content. They must be platforms for engaging students and teachers as full agents of their own learning. This quote's going to stay up on screen for a few more moments, and I want us to sit with it because we're all going to respond to it. So here are some instructions. On this piece of paper, you can, although you are not required, you are invited. It's not, again, not essential. You could put your name on this. You don't need to. It could be fun. It could also be anonymous. That's your choice. Because this piece of paper that you've torn out of this notebook is going to leave your possession in a few moments. Okay? So just want to give folks an expectation for that. As this piece of paper begins to dance around the room, and there might be some paper airplanes, there will certainly be some networking. You might want people to know that this piece of paper began with you, or not. That's up to you. So just want to let you know that. On this piece of paper, you're going to share certain kinds of responses. One might be a question. You might see this quote from Jesse. You've heard now our very brief introduction to critical digital pedagogy, and you might have a question. And so somewhere on your paper can be vertically oriented, horizontally oriented, you can write in angles, you could maybe even draw. You might want to pose a question in response to this quote. That's an option, okay? With me so far? Okay. But there's another kind of response to this same quote that you might want to share. You might want to share a reflection. Maybe even our conversation so far, maybe this quote is causing you to reflect upon some aspect of your own teaching practice, of your own design work, of your own work as a pedagogue. Maybe you're having a kind of reflective thought that you'd like to get from here down here. And so maybe your response isn't a question, maybe your response is a reflection. That's another option, okay? With me so far? Okay? You might also take the sandbox approach. You might be like, I'm not sure who these guys are, this is totally crazy, this is a little bit of a mess, it's a little too ambiguous, a little open-ended, I'm not sure what to make of this, I'm going to just kind of play in the sandbox. You might want to make a little drawing, you might want to write some random thoughts. This is kind of like the free space in the middle of the bingo board. It's your sandbox to play in. We do a lot of that, kind of playing with ambiguity and openness. That's another possible way to respond to this quote. And then the fourth way is to share some part of your practice. A lot of us are here because we care deeply about teaching, and we care then deeply about how our students learn. And maybe you have a story. Maybe you're thinking of a particular student. You don't need to tell us that student's name, but maybe something about what that student has done in one of your courses. Maybe you have a story about working with a colleague. Maybe there's a very specific kind of spark that you want to share with us. These then are your options in responding to Jesse's quote. So right now, take about a minute or two, and on your blank piece of paper, however you feel comfortable in doing so, leave a question, a reflection, play in the sandbox, or share a story. And if you do so, leave a little bit of room for other people, because we're going to begin to do something with this response in just a few minutes. So take a few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't think we'd have to write. What's it?
There'll be a test.
I got
coming
an
up.
apple there, so it's not. Oh, no. Oh, okay. I promise. I got the paper.
Okay.
I'm good.
I think we should. Oh,
Well, I got some. Sure. Yeah. I got some. Oh,
Another 30, maybe 45 seconds. as folks begin to maybe wrap up that thought, part of what inspires me in this quote is that we're about to turn this very traditional classroom, where you are sitting in rows staring at me, into more of an open and networked educational environment. We're going to try and do some of this right now. We're going to try and open up the knowledge in the room and make this a networked space. And here's how that's about to work. So in this first round, you've been responding for about a minute to Jesse's quote. What we're about to do, it's going to get hectic, and that's going to be okay, and I've got a microphone so you're going to be able to hear me, is we're going to be getting up, we're going to be moving around, and we are literally going to start networking knowledge. This is your last chance to claim, to attribute your work. Again, you can leave it anonymous, you can put your name on it, but after this moment, your paper's gone, okay? So here's how this is going to work. We're going to pass papers one person per second for 10 seconds. So stand up, and here you go. Your first pass should happen now. Your second pass should happen about now. Your third pass should be happening about now. Your fourth pass should be happening about now. Your fifth pass should be happening about now. Your sixth pass should be happening about now. Your seventh pass should be happening about now. Your eighth pass should be happening about now. Your ninth pass should be happening about now. And make at least one more 10th pass. And when you have that 10th pass and you have a piece of paper, give someone a hug, because that's a friendly thing to do, and go find a seat. So we've just, look at this, we've got, Brad, don't get ahead of yourself, my friend. Don't get ahead of yourself. So as we begin our second round, you're invited to read and reply to your peer. So you've received a piece of paper. This piece of paper, you may or may not know who wrote it. It may have some space around it. There might likely be space on the other side. Begin a conversation. Again, we were provoked to think about critical digital pedagogy and particularly open and networked educational environments. And now you've seen at least one person's response to that. Read their response and respond to them. It's like not even
Right.
Take another 30-odd seconds to respond to this peer. And as you do so, you might want to start some ankle stretches, because we'll be sharing again. So as folks wrap up their response, your response, again, can be attributed or anonymous. Again, that's entirely up to you. If you'd like to add your name to your response, you can, or you can do so anonymously. As you wrap up, we're going to stand up. And your first pass should start about now. And your second pass should start about now. And your third pass should start about now. And your fourth pass. And now your fifth pass. Oh, Jen. Oh. And now your sixth pass. And now your seventh pass.
I think you keep getting it.
And now your eighth pass. And your ninth pass. And finally, pass your paper one more time to someone new, and then please find your seat. Yes. I hope we've all gotten our exercise for the day. So this is going to be our final response. I just want to actually be clear about that for both time and expectation. This is an opportunity to have a kind of summative response. Get off the microphone. And to reply once more to this, essentially a third layer of thinking. One of the things that you might do in this third response, we're not going to pass again. I hope that you enjoy getting out of your seat. I just want to give folks again the expectation of what we're about to do next. But do respond to the second response. As you add this third layer, you're invited to photograph your paper. Once you have that third response on it, you're then invited to tweet out the picture of your paper with the layered responses. And if I'm not mistaken, and if it's not up here, it should be, we have a hashtag for this conference. And we also have hashtags for like ThinqStudio and DigPed, but I think it's CU Online 2018, is that right? So write your third response. If you'd like to, you can then also photograph and tweet out your paper to that hashtag. And in about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, we're going to open this up for a cross-group discussion. As you're writing up that response, I'm going to briefly note what we've just done as a means of starting this conversation. So one of the things that we just did was we just were writing as thinking, and I think that's really quite critically important to this work. Much of the critical digital pedagogy work that inspired ThinqStudio has come from folks who are just very honest, transparent, and raw in their writing as thinking about their pedagogical practice. And that kind of vulnerability, I think, is really quite critical. So that's part of what we were doing here, writing as thinking. We were also, of course, sharing as networking. We turned this environment, this very traditional classroom, into a more, I'm not going to say entirely, but a more open and more networked environment. And we did that through sharing. And then we also were engaged, to pick up on Jen's point about engagement, which in this case was a process of knowledge building. And so these three ideas here really exemplify what makes ThinqStudio, for us, an important presence around critical digital pedagogy on our campus. The importance of sharing our thinking publicly, on sharing as networking, and the ways in which that then contributes to knowledge building. So given that we just kind of did this, although in a very simulated and short way, what are people saying? The floor is open. Your papers, your thoughts, what was networked, what was produced?
How do we increase interactions between instructors and between students?
Exploring is engaging.
Someone wrote that they felt their teaching has become dry, very too dry.
Thank you to that someone who shared that and being honest about that practice. Thank you.
What about needing faculty support to truly teach the teachers?
Faculty support to teach the teachers.
Creating buy-in with teachers, like when you're creating digital courses that might be used by another faculty member, how do you get that buy-in? How do you kind of bring them along with doing new stuff?
Which takes work.
Concept of just making full agents or changing out of the learners, so how to use motivation, transformational theories to do that.
Relevant, it's fun.
It's relevant, it's fun.
The thread about the repository, sort of a frustration with interacting with classes that just had a repository, that's all they were, and sort of a thread about how to, either a goal to change that or how to change that.
That's great. Thank you. Can I just briefly, as a kind of side meta moment here, pick up on your use of the term thread, which I think is really interesting, since we typically, at least maybe I will say, I typically associate that with the digital conversation, and here we're attributing that to material, handwritten conversation. I think it's important to notice how language and media and mediums kind of cross settings. So thank you for that. Anything else that stood out to folks about this exchange, about these themes, as we move into a slightly more traditional part of this presentation for the last few moments?
Brad made you look a little bit disco over there.
He did.
I tried to draw rain.
I'm dancing. I got my arm thing going on.
I'm very proud.
That's good.
You're free to tweet that.
Yes. Well, I would. Oh, please.
I think there was some amount of balancing between the total free form and the overthinking.
Oh, in the activity.
Yeah, well, yeah, and what I got responses of. Some people were really thinking it, I think, way over the top, and some people were oversimplifying what we were doing. And I think that's the balance of trying to do this, is to swim those currents.
Yeah. There's certainly the need to design for chaos within constraint, right? And then trusting that that's going to be okay, right? You know, hey folks, get out of your seats, run around this room. That's, I think, a useful metaphor that can be picked up upon even in other spaces. So we have about 15 minutes left in this session, and so we're going to turn towards, again, a slightly more, here's what ThinqStudio is, what we've been up to. What I would invite folks to do, though, in the next few moments is to continue taking notes. Please do photograph and share these pieces of paper, whether or not they were attributed, whether or not they make their way back to the original author, if there even is one now. I think it's an important thing to think about, but this, I think, is important knowledge to share with the rest of the symposium today, so please make these little pieces of paper now into digital trails and share them out online. And as you do that, I'm going to quickly move through a bit of background information about ThinqStudio, which, again, is a faculty-facing effort on the CU Denver campus to, in one case, and it's been mentioned here already, be inclusive. It's to help faculty to design learning opportunities that are inclusive in all kinds of ways, across all kinds of media and settings. And that focus on inclusivity is really a kind of core value to the work that we do with ThinqStudio. Again, we care a lot about being critical, and we spoke about this earlier, and that, again, kind of multiple definitions of criticality, everything from critical pedagogy all the way to critical thinking. Digital, again, is really important to us, but thinking again about the both affordances and the limitations of everything which is digital maybe the last thing we want to do is kind of run around like, pigeons with like, little surveillance monitors on us. But the digital matters. The question is how and in what ways. And finally, purposeful. We're a really purposeful group. We try and do our work rather intentionally. And so these kind of core commitments have really shaped our work at ThinqStudio over the past year. This past academic year, 2017-18, was our first year of programming. And I'm going to detail briefly some of the kind of key features of that programming, keeping in mind that Michael and Brad should interrupt me, as should quite a few folks who are in this room who've actually been active participants, if not shapers of this work over the past year. And I think it's also really important. And again, our website and our Twitter handle, where you can get all kinds of resources and additional information about what we've been up to this past year. So again, we're a cross-campus initiative to spark critical digital pedagogy, to support faculty professional development, and to sustain transformative teaching and learning. That was mentioned earlier, and I think that we try and ground our work in this kind of broad vision of the purpose of what we're doing, even if that means in pursuing this, there are many pathways to that end goal. And here's again that quote from Jesse. Again, I think it really sticks with us, and it kind of helps to become that guiding force for the work that we've done, creating these more open and networked environments. So what does this actually look like? So one of the features of our work is that we have a formal partnership with the Digital Pedagogy Lab. This is a actually international group, although it's based here in the States, that focuses on the intersection of digital pedagogy, critical pedagogy, the digital humanities, all kinds of really interesting pedagogical work. And we're formal partners with them. We were a sponsor of last summer's actually international, because one was in Canada, Summer Institutes. And we've had a lot of very productive interactions with this group. And I think that part of what's, I think, important is that our ability to kind of grow ThinqStudio in this local context is very much attached to both national and international networks of educators and scholars who are broadly defined, associated with this digital pedagogy lab and their communities. So again, for example, we sent 18 faculty last summer to the 2 digital pedagogy labs. One was in Vancouver, one was in Virginia, and from our commitment on campus, doing so in a very kind of cross-curricular and interdisciplinary way. So we had faculty representing the Auraria Library, CAM, CAP, CLAS, InWorks, and SEHD, and as we continue to evolve this work over the coming years, we hope to not only maintain this diversity of faculty representation, but also to include all aspects of the entire kind of student member community, including folks at Anschutz. And we want to be really inviting of folks to come to our events and hang out with us and kind of learn from the innovations that we're trying to put forward. A lot of the work that we end up doing on campus looks like this. So faculty workshops, this was actually just 2 weeks ago now maybe. One of the key features of our work this past year was a faculty fellows program. We had 5 faculty members, 2 from the School of Ed, 2 from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and 1 fellow from InWorks. And they were responsible for really experimenting and embracing this ethos of critical digital pedagogy. They were then experimenting with their own teaching, whether that was in classes or in mentoring groups. And then as a part of their work as mentors, they were also leading campus-wide workshops. And so this is one of our, in this case, School of Ed, faculty fellows leading a workshop with about 30-odd faculty and other educators about connected learning, principles of learning and design to create peer-supported, openly networked, production-centered learning. And what was really unique about this workshop, amongst many features, was that it very intentionally actually crossed K-12 and higher ed typical boundaries, which was a really nice kind of feature of this kind of workshop space. Again, more workshopping, Skyping in folks, as you saw in the other picture as well, trying to, again, maintain our connections beyond even what we do here at CU Denver. I wanted to give a shout out to, I think, a really important open access journal that might resonate with a lot of folks in this room.
Ray, do you know of anyone who might have published it?
I do, because I'm about to actually literally brag about my own work on the very next slide. So this is a really interesting space. Hybrid pedagogy is not only open access, it's actually trying to push open peer review as a new way of thinking critically about how knowledge is literally produced. And so, again, a lot of us academics, and I do this, and Michael's certainly done this, and I'm sure many of you have done this as well, kind of double-blind peer review is this kind of gold standard. Well, this journal, in addition to being open access, flips that model of peer review on its head and says, if we're going to honestly speak about our teaching practice, and we're going to really try and truly represent the complexities of our work in our own classrooms, we need to know who's writing, and we need to also know who can kind of actively engage in that peer review process before something moves out into the world. I've found the essays and articles on this website to really be inspiring points of entry into thinking broadly about critical digital pedagogy and into connecting with a lot of the kind of national and international leaders who are working in this space. I would, again, highly recommend that you check it out. And yes, I did recently publish an essay in this journal as well. It was really lovely. I was speaking specifically about the real importance of ignorance in this work and having high quality ignorance as a kind of driving motivator for what makes this work stick. The key aspect of partnerships, which I've also briefly touched upon. Again, openness being a kind of core value, as well as boundary crossing and the way in which we need to move outside of our comfort zones and move into other kind of geographic, physical, and conceptual spaces as we do this work. And so you're very welcome to read my essay. That's a direct link. Or again, you can just go to Hybrid Pedagogy. It's one of the more recent essays that's been published. Another piece of ThinqStudio, and maybe Brad wants to interrupt me at this point, is CU Studio. We are running a kind of local flavor of a national effort called Domain of One's Own. ...
So we're exactly what he said. So Domain of One's Own, those of you who are familiar with it, no explanation needed. Those of you who are not, it's really about digital identity, digital portfolios, empowering faculty and students with a domain of their own, literally their own web space. But it's more than just giving out websites. It's about using that in pedagogical fashion. So in a way, the web itself becomes your LMS.
It started at the University of Mary Washington, where all students were given a website to build and accumulate and give away their learning.
Right, and so the nice thing, too, with this form of digital portfolio is that students, when they graduate, take it with them. It's not locked up in a walled garden inside of an LMS or some system that the university owns. It is theirs. They have their own domain, www.myname.com, which becomes their identity on the web. And so we focus all of our work around that. That's Domain of One's Own in cu.studio. Which is attached to all the above.
Yeah, so we've been hosting a number of domains. Again, we're starting a small pilot. We're actually reporting out on this work this evening to our dean about this kind of pilot work, but exciting to have this kind of technical infrastructure as, again, one flavor of our work. We had a lovely event just this past Friday. There are quite a few folks in this room who were at Rethink. This was our first big year one unconference. Quick reflections. I'm going to call them folks. Taylor, Gita, others who were.
A general reflection. It was untraditional in the best sense of that word, and I think the intimate nature of it. I still am finding myself gravitating away from bigger, broader conversations, and it was even tighter than this in a lot of cases. So I think there was, Jesse and Sean brought this, they made everyone feel comfortable to be vulnerable in these smaller spaces, and so the conversations got well beyond what you typically get at a conference like that. So dug in pretty deep on some very real issues, which is the ethos of CDP.
Yeah, awesome.
And I'd like to add, too, just so we're clear on, ThinqStudio began as this grassroots kind of thing, and everything you just said kind of represents what we are. Very untraditional. Everything we've done today represents who we are and where we're going. The good news is that the university has funded us for another year. They funded this year because we had this harebrained idea, and we did it, and it seems to resonate. And the university has said, we want to keep this. We want to make it permanent. So we're officially joining the Office of Digital Education and partnering with CU Online to be a part of that team and to kind of keep this spirit of work alive, because in our view, all education is digital education. There's no, we call it digital, we call it online. It's all connected, and that's really how we approach it. And so we hope to see you on some kind of routine basis.
I'm going to just swing past these tweets, which were fun and awesome, but I'm going to leave this here. Brad, do you want to touch on this before we open it up for a few quick Q's and A's?
Sure.
Before?
So we have what we call faculty explorers, and we have what we call faculty fellows. Faculty explorers, when you join us, there's a little application online. You go online and you say, I would like to go to one of these fantastic conferences. And we have a handful that we've pre-selected. And you tell us where you want to go. And then there's a small application where we actually have you kind of write like a cover letter that says, this is why I want to go. This is why this resonates with me. This is why I believe in the kind of stuff that ThinqStudio is doing. And then we like to send people to conferences. We send you there, board, food, all that kind of stuff, because we want you to go out like reporters in the field, like you're our correspondents, right? And you're going to collect information and learn from the conference. And then the way you pay it back, you're going to pay it forward when you come back to campus by offering a ThinqStudio workshop with us next year. And by offering it, we're going to ask you to say, well, tell us what the coolest thing you learned at the conference was. We like to send people in teams or in cohorts because in our experience, we've found that having a partner or a buddy or a cohort with whom you share that experience really makes all the difference in the world.
Can I jump in?
You may.
That's exactly how we got started. 2 years ago, respective deans of CLAS and education funded, and this was unimaginable, a whole passel of us from both colleges to go out there with uncertain return when we came back and created this. The other thing is that this is due in a week, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So go to the ThinqStudio website. There's an apply button.
It's
apply
not hard.
as an explorer. If you, and a lot of people are like, it's a free trip, and in a kind of way it is, but it's also, we kind of see ThinqStudio, when we say we mean we, us. This is kind of a co-op type of thing, and we're all in this together. So if you join us in that capacity, we want you to join us for the long term, both in terms of our workshops and our work and our thinking, our pedagogy, and this kind of stuff. The other bit is our faculty fellows, who are, it's a bigger commitment than the explorers, which means folks who join us for an entire year of programming to help us run these kinds of events. Faculty fellows get a course release. They get to do the explorer thing, go off somewhere, report from the field. They help us host workshops. They will be working closely with the Office of Digital Education and the instructional designers from CU Online, and helping to architect quite a bit of where all this digital ed is going here at the university. So there's an app, it's a similar process. Go to the website, tell us where you want to go, which conference you'd like to go to. There's a cover letter you need to draft, and kind of, it's just like a cover letter for a job. Tell us why you're the right person for the job. And we're not looking for super techie digital types, because it's not about that, really. We're looking for people with heart, and we're looking for people who show grand potential to keep these issues alive on a world of big data, digitized enrollment, and all that stuff. We kind of see ourselves as
We're Lorax.
We're the Lorax.
We're the Lorax.
We speak for the trees.
I mean, that's your metaphor, right, folks?
Yeah.
We speak for the trees.
There you go.
So having said that, lunch starts in a minute, but that being said, we might have a little bit of a buffer in terms of time. So Michael, Brad, and I are happy to answer questions, to hang out, and to talk with folks. Taylor's...
I want to make a quick shameless plug, too, not because I want to make the shameless plug, but because it's another local option, TLTS, which is run out of Metro.
Yes. Thank you, Taylor.
Sean and I think now Jesse will both be back out for that event in October, October 5th. So I'm saying that more to say, if you want exposure to ideas that I think resonate with all of us in this world, that's another option to come and hear from them and interact with them.
Tell them about how they can register.
msudenver.edu/TLTS.
TLTS.
We ThinqStudio folks had a lovely time helping to facilitate TLTS this past October. It was an amazing event, and so again,
We'll be back.
We'll be back. So just keeping this spirit of this kind of work alive. Any like singular, totally burning question for the crew before we say thanks and go eat some food? Anything? Thoughts? Okay. Well, we're around, so come. Oh, there's swag. We have Rethink swag. So if you want
What's left?
stickers and flash drives, come on up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That was fun.